you. And a very warm and slightly soggy and very windy welcome. It's been all the weathers today, hasn't it? All of them, all at once at times. Welcome to Facebook Live for Chicken and Frog, and a very huge and happy welcome to the brilliant Amy McCaw and the equally brilliant Stagg, who are going to be in conversation with, it's all very fancy, about Amy's brand new book, Mina and the Undead. If you haven't read it yet, why not? Partly because we've sold out. So I'll let you off because it's gone, but it'll be back on Monday. So I'm going to disappear and hand over to Amy and Chris so they can have a good old chat, probably a cheesy chat at moments, I think, about Mina and the Undead. Over to you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Lovely to virtually meet you at last, Amy.
Yeah, you too. We've been chatting for a little while, haven't we?
Yeah.
And realised we've got quite a few things in common. So yeah, I'm looking forward to this chat.
It's really weird in this kind of almost post-pandemic world that you're not actually getting to physically meet people anymore. Although I suspect by your accent we're quite far away anyway.
Probably. I'm in South Yorkshire, so I've been sitting here all the way through the pandemic, but having conversations with people in New York and London, and that's been one advantage actually that I would never have done at an event with a New York author, I don't think.
No, that's incredible. And I've really got to say before we start, how insanely jealous I am of the background. Your room just looks incredible.
Thank you. It's been about 20 years in the making, all this merchandise, and luckily it's mostly contained into this space, so my whole house doesn't look like this, but yeah, there's quite a lot of money behind me.
Yeah, I bet.
A whole student loan just gone.
We're talking about your book.
Yes, I have it here too, just in case.
Mina and the Undead. I absolutely love the kind of old, the VHS look to the case as well.
Yeah, the UConn designer Becky did an absolutely amazing job. Like, I loved the little details. She used an interview with the Vampire case for inspiration of the little details.
Oh, really?
On the side. Yeah, so they had the interview with the Vampire cover has the little mini cover on the side, so that's where she got that idea from. And I just love the fact that people keep messaging me complaining that there's a fake sticker on the back that they keep trying to peel off. I
did that as well.
Did you?
I did. I thought, that's not how much I paid, but anyway, but that's, it's really good. And obviously I've read the book and really blown away by it. I've not read anything like this before. I'm not overly familiar with young adult genre books, but I thought this was incredible. And it's really, if other young adult books are like yours, then you've really opened up a new genre for me to explore. So before we even get started, I really urge everyone to check out this book. Obviously check it out through Chicken and Frog as well. Really fantastic read.
Thank you. That's
congratulations. And I hear big things as well, like with Forbidden Planet.
Yeah, it's been amazing. The support from independent bookshops, school libraries, and places like Forbidden Planet, I think, is stocking it in all their stores. And one of the stores made it Book of the Month, which was absolutely delightful because I didn't ever think that a genre book like this would be a Book of the Month somewhere. But then, of course, you've got Forbidden Planet, who are the kind of kings and queens of genre everything.
When you can, you should take a picture of it there.
I'm going to Liverpool, and they've got apparently a pile of my books waiting for me to sign, so that'll be a lovely
Oh wow,
experience.
that'll be fantastic.
Yeah, really good.
So, Mina and the Undead, tell us about Mina and the story.
Okay, so Mina and the Undead, as Chris mentioned, is a YA murder mystery. It's set in 1995 New Orleans at the height of the fascination with vampires, just after the Interviewed Vampire movie came out. So Mina goes to stay with her sister for the yearly vampire festival, and they're having a great time. She even gets a job in a horror movie mansion where she gets to scare tourists and reconnect with her sister, who she's become estranged from over the past year because her sister moved to New Orleans and left her behind. And then strange things start happening, and Mina gets the job in the horror movie mansion but finds a dead body at work. And she realises quickly that somebody's killing people in the style of New Orleans myths, and Mina has to figure out what's going on before she becomes the next victim.
I mean, and that's what I really loved about the book, and one of the things that I really wasn't expecting was how much of a mystery it is as well. And you're just trying to unravel it yourself as you go along. Where did the idea come from?
So I went to New Orleans in 2012, and I knew I wanted to write a book about it. I've written things in the past, but I just love the spooky settings. Everywhere you go, there's a story. People are so friendly, want to talk to you. There's just this incredible sense of place. The food is amazing. You can go wander around graveyards, go into like voodoo shops. I was going to say zombie, but there's a famous voodoo shop called Reverend Zombie's Voodoo Shop. And it's just the most incredible place. And it was the stories that got me thinking, like, what kind of story could I set here? There's all these local legends. And I wanted to write a serial killer book, and the two somehow blended together and turned into Mina and the Undead.
You wrote this just on the back of just one visit to New Orleans?
Yeah, I did. So the main idea came to me then, and I tried writing it then, but I just wasn't ready. I was still quite young, and I know some young people can write amazing books, but I was not one of them. I needed, and I was teaching at the time, and I didn't have loads of time, so I wrote other things which were decent, and I tried to get an agent. But in 2018, I queried this book after being on a mentoring program, Right Mentor, and got my agent, and then the book deal the following year. But yeah, it was a long time in the making, lots of research. I found a local tour guide who was willing to talk to me from New Orleans, so she gave me lots of stories.
Remotely?
Yeah, so just via
that's
email.
really good.
Yeah, and she's called Rose Siniston. She's amazing to follow on Instagram and Twitter if you want some cool vampire stories. And yeah, so she answered my questions, told me about myths, told me about the way people talk and things like that. My friend Hannah Cates, who's also an author, she went around all the locations in the book for me and took photographs just to check that I'd got everything right. And I got a lot of little details from her book. Like she took an amazing picture of a wall that somebody had put this sort of tacky stuff down, I don't know what it was, like tar, and put broken glass along it to keep people out of their property, and that went straight in the book. I just loved it. So yeah, a lot of time, a lot of research, but I'm really pleased with the reaction to it.
I mean, that's one of the things that really struck me is I've never been to New Orleans, unfortunately, but I felt like I was there. Really, the way you, I mean, it's not just the research you've done there, the way you write it, the way you've described it. You know, a lot of people will write and talk about such and such looked this way and it had this, but you know, you're talking about the heat and the feeling of their clothes on their skin, and it really evoked different weather patterns, the night and day, and really helped to put you there. I mean, so you had one trip and you had people there who were giving you information. How did you approach researching then to actually form it into a coherent, okay, this is the world they're going to inhabit?
Yeah, so I think, as I said, it started quite slowly. I wanted to write, I knew there was going to be a fortune teller in it. And at first I thought that might be the main character, and it did not work at all. And as soon as I realized that it was a teenager, that gave me the way into the book. So a lot of my early research, I watched loads of stuff set in New Orleans. I watched obviously stuff like Interview with the Vampire. I read books set there. I read a lot of nonfiction, and the early stage was just information gathering. And I read this brilliant article that said that New Orleans' deadliest year was 1994. And I thought, oh, wouldn't that be an interesting time to set the book? I wonder what else happened in 1994. It turns out Interview with the Vampire came out that year. And I just liked that, the fact that all these tourists were coming to New Orleans in the mid-90s, fascinated with vampires. What would happen if there was a serial killer in New Orleans and all these hapless tourists who want to meet a vampire? And that was sort of where the idea came from. I think the sisters and the fortune telling and all the spookiness, but it was the 90s setting that I think really propelled it into what it became.
I think, as I said before, one of the things that I most enjoyed was the mystery element to it. And when people start dying, you know, you kind of, you don't know if it's a monster or a person or people. And it was really fun to try and work out what was going on, who you could trust, and that kind of thing. And more than once, I thought I had it pegged, and I was just completely wrong.
That's
and
such good news. Thank you.
As you go through and you start unraveling it, I think it'd be very easy to just hang on to something and say, okay, I'll see where this is going now. And I didn't at all. I got surprised again and again and again as it went on. And, you know, as it kind of speeds up, as it goes through the book, there was more surprises, more surprises. I'm fascinated by people who can write mystery. How did you know who the villain was going to be at the beginning?
The overarching villain. And I felt the overarching villain was maybe one of the more obvious points. And I thought, I'll let readers have that one. And some of the things, I seeded that as I went along. So I knew when I was writing the very first draft, I knew that that's who the person was or thing, you know. So I knew that, but I didn't know, as you said, all the other twists and what some of the other characters was really going on in the heads. the things that they weren't telling you. I think a lot of that came later on. So with each round of drafting, that just got layered and layered. And the mystery was the hardest thing at the end. I had to unpick it so many times to check that it held up and then kind of put it back together again. So there are clues, there are red herrings. And I just had to follow each thread through and check that each character's progression, that moment where you thought, oh, is it that person? I hopefully seeded that for you, but then kind of pulled it out from you and showed you that it was something else.
Well, I know you say you feel like the villain in the end, was kind of I'll give that to them. I mean, it was a double bluff for me, because I thought about it and I thought, no, it's not. It can't be this person, no. And very, very wrong I was as well. Do you plan meticulously for this work?
It's a combination. I tend to plan in a lot of detail, scene by scene. So I had the overarching idea. I knew where it was going to end very early on. It very slightly changed, but the overarching plot was the same. And I knew the story of who the villain was. But I think the plotting for me, I get so far and then I get excited and I have to start writing it. And then I get to a point where I think, oh, I'm stuck, I need to plot again. So I do some really detailed plotting, especially the last scene in the book is quite complicated and it moves between 2 different locations. So that took a lot of plotting and rewriting. I think I went through 4 drafts of that. Just on what I see as my first draft, that scene went through 4 drafts just to get it right. So I've read this book a lot of times. That was how I did it.
I mean, that last part, you're right, it is complicated, but it's not complicated to follow. I mean, I found it just a joy. Very, it really takes you along. And one of the other things, I mean, obviously I'm showing my naivety here with young adult books, but I wasn't expecting it to be as gory as it was. And some of the descriptions that are in there, like with a vampire bite, you kind of, like in a lot of films, unless they're pure horror, it's kind of romanticized and you don't really get to see it, but you really describe the visceral kind of ripping and tearing. So were horror films a big influence on your work?
They were, and I think I knew straight on that I didn't want them to be kind of pretty vampires. I wanted them to walk that line of, if you are somebody who is going to live forever, but the cost is that you have to bite people, I don't think that is kind of a pleasant thing. And hopefully if I get to write another book, that's something I'm going to explore more, like the kind of pleasure, pain, why do some people want to be bitten? Why do some people want to do the biting? So it could even go further in that direction. But yeah, sorry, I've just gone round and about to actually get to your question, which was about horror films.
Horror films, yeah.
Yeah. So my biggest influence is Buffy, and as you can probably see, I've got the Buffy library behind me, and most of the figures are Spikes. That tells you a bit about who my favourite character is. And I like the fact that Buffy has some incredibly scary films. Any Buffy fans, if you say what's the scariest moment, will probably say Hush, the Gentleman.
Yes.
Yeah, creepy skeletal figures that silently go down the street and steal people's voices so that they can then decide on who they're going to kill and nobody can scream. And that was on, at 7:15 on a Thursday night when I watched it. So I think that came at me at a very formative time. And then the horror films of the 90s were a lot of slashers, and they were very slick, fast-paced, twisty. You didn't know who you could trust. And I think a lot of that is what I pulled into my book. So things like Scream, I Know What You Did Last Summer, Urban Legend, they were the films that I grew up watching. So I think they left an indelible print on my psyche, and what I still love to watch. I still rewatch those films just about every year.
I mean, it does really, now I couldn't put my finger on it before, but now you say that there was a real sense of familiarity with it, and it does read like a slasher film. Now you've said Scream, I can kind of feel like the presence of Sydney, and it really feels like that cat and mouse game in a horror kind of way.
Yeah, that's exactly what I wanted to do. And I don't know did you read the Point horror books in the 90s or
Yeah.
Street or anything like that? And I think I read those books when I was 9 or 10 initially, and I carried on reading them into my early teens. And I think they are very short, fast-paced, twisty, actually some of them are quite shocking. Somebody gets eaten by piranhas at the end. That's how they kill the villain. He falls into a piranha pool and dead. Spoiler, I won't tell you which one it is. You can look out for the piranhas. But yeah, and I think you can still get those books secondhand. I would recommend them to any horror fans. But I think YA is going through a fantastic period of really scary books. There's books like Harrow Lake by Kat Ellis, and I've just read her book, which is coming out this summer, Wicked Little Deeds, Burden Falls in America. And they're incredibly scary, tense, twisty. And there's books like Last One to Die by Cynthia Murphy as well. And there's a real sense of, is the supernatural real? Is it in the character's head? And they're very dark and very twisty and gory. So I think my book actually probably sits at the lighter end on the gore scale compared to some.
Mm. I mean, there's, in terms of the 90s, it's just, the whole book is just packed full of references to horror films, vampire films. I mean, were there other reasons why you set it in the 90s other than that being the most violent year in New Orleans history?
Yeah, so that was the start. It was the fact that Into the Vampire and the deadliest year in history just beautifully intersected into the same year. But also, as I started to write it, because I'm writing a book at the minute and I haven't quite decided, it's probably not going to be set in the present day, and I haven't quite settled on a time period because there hasn't been that hook. And for me, it was that real life versus Into the Vampire, but also all the references just fit perfectly. So the kind of slasher vibe that I wanted is very 90s. And the references that I was making, like The Crow and the Buffy movie, and obviously Interview with the Vampire is one of the heavily referenced things. They just, I think, fit with the tone of the book and with the tone of the 90s. And because I grew up then, I felt like I could draw on what, obviously, I didn't have anywhere near the experiences that Mina has as a teen, fortunately. But I think that it all just fit, that decade really worked, and the pop culture references all backed me up. Like even Kurt Cobain and Nirvana has that kind of grungy gothic feel, and I managed to get that in there as well.
I mean, for me, it really did make me smile every time that something come up that I recognised, and I'm sure there's probably lots I've missed. And I think it's the kind of thing, if you read the book again, you'll probably get more things. The bit that really did make me smile was when they went to the Empire of the Dead, and Lucas was dressed as David from the Lost Boys.
Yeah,
and you talk about how he swept back his hair, and I just thought that was so accurate, because I mean, for me, Lost Boys is one of my favourite vampire films, and David is incredible. And the way you described that, I thought, oh, I know what that is. And it was, every time that happened, it just puts a little smile on your face as well.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I was a bit worried that people who don't love genre stuff as much as I do.
How did you, as well?
Sorry, I've lost you a little bit. I think we just talked over each other. Everything's frozen up for a second. So I'll let Chris catch up.
Of broadband, I got a warning of broadband issue, I think. Right. Yeah, what I was asking was the kind of vampire mythology that you have. How did you build that? What did you decide that, you want certain bits, you want to leave out other bits? How did you build it for your characters?
I did a few things. So I realised that in my world, people don't know at the start of the book whether vampires are real or not. And you spend a long time as the reader trying to figure that out. So I knew that vampires had to be hiding in plain sight. So I had to factor that in. And also, I knew the kind of vampires I want them to be. So as I said, I wanted them to be scary, ones that could kill you, but also be quite sexy, fun, at times a little bit silly and kind of over-exaggerated. So then when I had that idea, I went through all the vampire stuff I could think of, and I wrote down the mythology, and I just mapped out my own. I decided what would work for the plot. So, what powers might my vampires have? What limitations would they have? Because I think it's no fun if they are just completely invincible. And I just went through the vampire mythology and then just create my own path. And I think I took a lot of it from other people's, but then some of it I just made up. And maybe somebody will say, oh, no, you didn't. You got it from Blade or something. But I'd like to think some of it's totally unique to mine.
Did you have to do a lot of vampire film research?
It was a terrible tragedy. I had to rewatch all my old favourites over and over again. It was great fun. I'm not gonna lie. I rewatched Buffy. I watched the Buffy movie, and Lost Boys I watched just about every Halloween anyway, so that was no great addition to my repertoire. I watched all things like Scream, and I Don't Know It Did Last Summer, and just sat back and thought, why do I love this? Why did that twist the first time around? Why did that get me? Should I have guessed that? So I tried to analyse them from that point of view, and then also think of things that I could reference. And I've still got a list. I keep thinking of things that I missed out of the first book that if I get to write another, that are going to go into that one. So there's plenty more pop culture that I can draw on.
There was something that happened in the book, various locations where you really took your time to describe the ceiling and the lighting.
Yeah.
And in the mansion, you really go out of your way to describe these lights made out of bear traps.
Yep, I did.
Is that real? Or where did that come from? Where did that idea come from?
I have always found bear traps really scary in horror films, and they feature in more of them than you think. And I think the idea, I won't talk about it too much because it'll probably gross somebody out, but the thought of how a bear trap works, I just find horrifying. So, and I thought they're also quite pretty. They glint and they've got sharp edges that you could put a light in. So I decided, and I was thinking originally the end scene of the book, which starts at the mansion and then moves, wasn't going to move and it was going to end at the mansion. So I didn't end up using the bear traps, but I've sort of saved them. They're there hanging over the characters waiting for somebody to be underneath.
Yeah, I mean, I did wonder. I just loved how you kept describing them, because it really helped, because it's not something I'd ever heard of. I could really picture it and it made it seem more real. And I definitely think you should start producing lamps made out of decommissioned bear traps and animal traps, because that would be fantastic.
Did you remember the bit in the book I did reference something about lamps? I think that stayed in the final cut. There was a serial killer called Ed Gein that used to make things out of human skin, and one of them was lamps, and that inspired Silence of the Lambs. So interesting. Yeah, somebody gave me that reference. That wasn't one of my own. What's that? Sorry, I missed that bit.
That was disgusting. I mean,
I'm sorry.
As long as you don't make any skin lamps, then everything will be okay.
I probably shouldn't do that. Maybe some fake ones. But yeah,
so is there going to be another book with Mina in?
I hope so. I've got the idea for 2 more books and a novella, which wouldn't be from Mina's point of view, but I'm not going to say any more just in case I do get to write it. I want that to be a surprise. But as with anything in publishing, you know, my publisher has to know that these books are doing well. This book is doing well. So hopefully I will get to write the rest.
I mean, I really hope so, because, you know, obviously we don't want to give everything away, but the way you leave the book, you don't really leave the characters. They're still doing things, and you could easily see more to come.
Yeah, and it's a risk, isn't it?
If I may say, you might not say this, but it's the kind of story that I could really see this story as like a television series. I really feel like it could make that jump.
Yeah, quite a few people have said that, and I would love it, especially Netflix. I think Netflix have done some brilliant series like Riverdale and The Chilling Adventures of Sabrina. They've got that kind of dark, macabre teen thing down to a T. I mean, if anybody else wants to make it into a film, I'm not opposed to it. I think it would be fun. It would be weird and hard to see, especially because some of the characters in my head, like, I think casting them would be really difficult because they're quite specific. But yeah, I would love it. I think it'd be great to see it.
You just have to negotiate that as part of the deal, that you retain casting control.
I don't think that normally happens. But yeah, I could, I suppose. Just dangle it over them. You can't have it unless I can cast it. I think Leonardo DiCaprio is too old, though, now.
What advice would you... I think it's... Yeah. We never know. He might.
Could age him down.
Well, there are a few older characters in there as well, so you never know.
True.
Yeah.
Sorry, I think I interrupted you. We're on a slight delay, so.
What advice would you give to people looking to move into writing?
I think what really did it for me was finding a community of people to support me and to help my writing, because it's incredibly hard to get a book published. I don't think people realise that to get traditionally published, you usually need an agent. Then the agent sends it out to publishers, and there'll be a lot of rejections along the way. Even like Harry Potter got something like 20 rejections before somebody picked it up, and it seems unbelievable. So you have to be quite thick-skinned and not take that to heart. So I think having a community that can support that side of it is really helpful, who knows what you're going through, and then who can actually help you to be a better writer. So I did a program called Write Mentor, where my mentor, Marissa Noel, worked with me over months editing this book. So she went through it twice with me, suggesting things I could tighten, and some of the references are hers, like the one I mentioned about the serial killer with the lamps, was something that I referenced Silence of the Lambs, and she said, have you heard of Ed Gein in the in the comments for me, and I looked him up and thought that is perfect. It needs to go in there. So I think some of the best ideas I had because I thrashed them out with other people, or I had the idea and somebody helped me to improve it. And I think that new writers, I certainly benefited from finding a community of trusted critique partners. And even the books I write now, I still send out. I think I've got about 5 people reading my current work in progress.
Oh, wow. And do you have a kind of a strict writing schedule? Do you try and write a certain amount every day?
I just laughed because I would love that. I would love it if I had like a designated 2 hours that I could carve out of the day. At the moment, I find that really difficult because I work part-time and I've got a 14-month-old who has learned to walk and talk and run. So generally I write when he's asleep. So if he has a long nap, I have a good long writing session. If he has a short nap, I don't write much at all. And I write when he's in bed. So I try and write 500 words a day at the moment because I'm still doing a lot of Mina promo. That's taking up quite a bit of my time. So my new thing, I'm just chipping away at it. But I think the promo is quieting down a bit over the summer, so I should be able to do a bit more writing. But no, it's definitely not a kind of well-guarded time. I wish it was, but at the moment it's just not really practical.
You actually sound like, I don't want to jump to any conclusions here, but you sound like your sleep pattern has switched to a kind of vampiric sleep pattern.
It's sort of switched to a no sleep pattern sometimes. My little boy's doing really well, but he still wakes up a couple of times a night at least. So I used to like, 9 or 10 hours sleep is ideal for me, but I'm working on a lot less now and it's fine. I only feel, slightly exhausted by the end of every day, but
that and coffee.
Yeah, see, I don't drink that much coffee, but tea is helpful. Chocolate is very helpful. And Netflix has been quite a guiding light during lockdown. I've been spent a lot of time. If I just write a few hundred words, I can watch whatever is the thing that I'm watching. Tiger King at the start, followed by all kinds of other stuff along the way.
So, Mike, before I get to my last question, just again, fantastic book, and I really hope more and more people read it. My last question for you is, where can people find out more about you, about the book, and your social media and that kind of thing?
Oh, thank you. So I have a website, amymcclaw.co.uk, which has absolutely everything on. My kind husband made it for me, and it's really comprehensive. So all the past events I've done are on there, information about future events, and you can read about the book. There's pre-order links. I'm also really active on Twitter and Instagram. I'm called YA Under My Skin, because I started, it sounds a bit macabre now in the context of horror and what I've just said about skin lamps, but it's not that. It was more the fact that I feel like a teenager under my skin, like I haven't grown up. And that's always the blogging handle I've used, so I decided to keep it. And if you choose to interpret it in that, gothic and creepy manner, you can. And I've just started a YouTube channel.
You want to interpret it as a serial killer?
I know, I do know, excellent. And I've only just realised that because of all the talk about skin, it's made me think twice about my handle. Yeah, and I'm also on YouTube. Talking about not enough time, I decided to start a YouTube channel a month ago because I'm that kind of person, and that is Amy McCaw. So I haven't got loads of followers yet, but I'm really enjoying doing it, and I've just interviewed Kat Ellis on there, who, as I mentioned, is a fantastic YA horror author. So I do author interviews, I talk about what I'm reading, and I'm thinking of doing some writing stuff as well if people are interested.
Oh, I think definitely they would be. I think that would be incredible.
Oh, thanks.
Hello.
Hi, thank you.
Hello. Oh, that was so lovely. I'm just sitting here in my bedroom listening to you both. What a nice way to spend a Saturday evening. Gone are the days of wild nights out. This is literally my night out.
Same.
Thank you both so much. Brilliant interview. Really interesting to listen to both of you. Chris, as you're here, do you want to tell people a little bit about the London Horror Society?
I'm one of the managers at the London Horror Society. We are a community who support indie horror. So it kind of started out like a news and reviews website, but now we've moved into a program where we try and help get people's genre films made. And we've actually got an event coming up this coming Wednesday, which is a speed pitching event, completely free. You just go on to, you sign up, you get a link to Zoom, and then you either pitch your film and what you need, and then hopefully people contact you and say, oh, I can help, or you could say, hey, I'm an experienced director of photography, here I am, and I'm ready to work. So it's always proves really fun as well.
Awesome. Sounds amazing. And yeah, just huge congratulations again, Amy, because the book is fantastic, and as I say, we genuinely cannot keep it on the shelves. It's just
that is such good
flying
news.
out. That's brilliant. I think there's been a gap. I think you're right. The YA market, they're starting to get more kind of creepy horror stuff, which is great. But there's definitely, you've filled that gap just beautifully. And I think one of the things that's really popular about it is it's great for the intended age audience, but it's also great for people like me who like absolutely love Lost Boys. I mean, when I met Jim, Chris knows what he looked like. You don't. He did look vaguely, and he had the same hair that David had in Lost Boys, and that was definitely the attraction for me.
Yeah, I bet.
So I think, like, for an older reader as well, you read it and get those references and just go, "Oh my god, I feel like a kid again." So it's fantastic. So thank you so much for writing it and sharing it with the world. Really enjoying it. Can't wait for the next one.
Thank you. Fingers crossed.
Fingers crossed.
And thank you for having me
so much. Pleasure.
Thank you.
Absolute pleasure. All right, thank you for joining us over in Facebook land. If you did miss it, don't worry, it will be on our Facebook page, but it's also going to be on Amy's YouTube channel as well. And as Amy has said, she's got loads of goodies on her YouTube channel, so go and check it out. And have a lovely Saturday evening.